This video we're going to look at communication management. So we're going to start with an overview of communications. So you'll recall that we looked at this in previous videos. So we've got the work packages developed from the scope management process, scope planning. Then we figure out the resourcing, and we estimate what resources we require, the durations, how we're going to procure them or obtain them internally. So now we're looking at the other side of the table. The work packages, each one has distinct requirements, and one of them is quality, so you need to make sure you do the work package properly. We looked at that in the previous video. Another is communications. What communications need to happen. Now, some work packages, there might not be any communication requirements. Then of course there's safety and environmental protection planning as well. And once again, there's some work packages that don't require safety planning. There's no hazards involved, or there's no effect on the environment. So, but for many work packages, especially if you're doing construction, these two are relevant. Now, we're not looking at these as part of the course because we looked at them in construction practices. So we're not looking at safety or environmental planning. We looked at quality planning in the previous video, and in this one we're looking at communications planning. So first of all, let's look at what communications is. It's a three-point process. Someone has a message, something that they want to tell someone else or tell a group of people. They need to encode it. In other words, they need to put it into a format where those people can understand what they're talking about. They need to transmit it. They need to get it from them to the other person, and they need to receive confirmation. So the person that receives it needs to confirm that they understand it. So they might ask questions just to make sure they understand it, or if there's information that's lacking, that they are actually getting that information. So we've got the sender. The responsibility of the sender is to encode the message, to put it in a form where the receiver is going to receive the information that they need to receive, and is responsible for making that information clear and complete. In other words, communicating in a way that the receiver is going to understand, and complete, that they receive all the information they require. Then they communicate it through a medium, the technology used to transmit the message. Now that could be an email, it could be a telephone call, it could be a conversation, it could be a newspaper article, it could be an advertisement, it could be a report. All those things are mediums, the way that you communicate it. And then it gets to the receiver. The receiver decodes the message. In other words, if it's a report, they read it. If it's an email, they read it. If it's a website, they download it and look at it. If it's a verbal communication, they listen and understand. And they are responsible for ensuring that their information is received and understood. If they do not understand the message or any part of the message, or they're a bit confused about it, it is their job to make sure that they ask questions or ask for additional information from the sender. The responsibility for clear communication is not just the sender, it is the receiver. If the receiver does not understand something, he or she should make that clear and seek that information that they require. That's quite an important thing for you as a student. As a tutor, I communicate the information to you, and if you don't ask me any questions, or if you don't seek clarification, then the assumption is that you have received the message, and if you haven't, then the responsibility for not receiving that message is yours because you haven't made it clear. Now, there are things that can interfere with the communication of the message. Noise. Now that might be actual noise, as in background information. It might be that you're on the phone in the middle of a construction site and there's a whole lot of plant working in the background and there's background noise. Or it could be non physical things like an accent. You might not understand my accent, or I might use words that you don't understand. So, and this is especially important when you're talking to members of the public. You could use engineering jargon and they don't understand what you mean, or they will misinterpret what you mean. So it is the responsibility of you, if you're talking to members of the public, to make sure that you're putting it in a format that they can understand, that you're not using jargon, that you're not using words that engineers use but the members of the public might use differently. For example, words like quality and risk are both words that us engineers have a different understanding of to what the members of the public understand it. So you need to be aware of that. Noise might also be the other person doesn't understand or thinks they understand but they don't understand, and so once again it's the responsibility of the sender to assess the receiver and what they can or they cannot understand. So there are different methods of communication, different types. There is push communication. This is the sender to receiver. In other words, I say something and you're in the room and you listen to it, or I send you a letter. So examples of push communication are written, so it can be written, can be spoken. It could be a video like this. So this video is a push communication. Well, actually it's a pull communication because you're downloading it. But if I sort of rang you up and talked to you on the phone, that would be push communication. So it's a letter, email, reports, signs, all those sort of things. Then there's pull communication, where the receiver accesses the information. So this is actually a pull communication. I am taking this video, I am putting it on YouTube. Then you are going to YouTube and you are downloading it, or you're going to Moodle and you're downloading it. So you are accessing the information that I have put onto YouTube. So websites, databases, displays, books, those things are all pull communication. In other words, the receiver pulls it to them. And then there's interactive two-way communication, which is verbal, or it could be, if you're having on a chat line, it could be written as well. So phone calls, meetings, and obviously nowadays chat. Or texting someone, if you're having a text conversation. So those things can all be interactive. So those are the types of communication, and you should be using all three of them according to the requirements of the project. So the communications management process. The process is required to ensure that timely and appropriate collection, distribution, control and storage of project information. In other words, you're collecting the information, so that might be collecting information about performance, efficiency, and communicating that onto your boss or to your client. Distributing it to the people that need the information, and only those people. So putting it in the level of detail that those people need. So your boss might need a detailed breakdown of the budget or the costs of the project to date, whereas the client might not. They might just need an overview of the whole thing. So when they're talking about distribution, they're also talking about making it so that it is in a format that the person, it is useful to the person, and that you're not overloading them with information. Controlling it. There's some information that you don't want to go to some people. So for example, you wouldn't be telling the general public about the costs of the project to date, or what you're budgeted for, or some of those sort of things. So, but you would be telling it to your boss. So control means you are giving the appropriate information to the right people. And then storage as well. Storing it there so that the communication itself, the information contained in the communication, is somewhere where people can access, or appropriate people can access it, but also as evidence that the communication actually occurred. That is why emails are so good. If you're emailing someone, there's a record that you have actually communicated information to that person. And if they've received it, then they can't very well deny that they didn't receive that information. So that's what communications management's all about. And the way we do it is we plan it right at the start. We look at who are the stakeholders, what do they need to know, how we're going to communicate with them. And we'll talk about that in the following video. Then when the project is underway, you manage communication. In other words, you implement your plan. You know, if you've decided that you're going to communicate to to neighbours that you're going to start work on a particular date, that you actually do that, that you send them letters or you go and visit them in person. You actually do it. So the executing is you do those things that you said you'd do. And controlling communications is looking at, are we actually communicating the right thing? Are the people receiving the information they require at the time that they require it? So that's that thing about timely and appropriate communication. So communication is really quite important. People, if they're not communicated with properly, are going to get angry at you. And also muck-ups can happen. So remember, communications is not just with external parties, it's communication within the organisation, within the project team. So if someone isn't given a particular bit of information, they could take actions or carry out work that is not required. So for example, if you don't issue if you've got a new set of drawings and you don't issue it to everyone, then the construction workers could be constructing work using old drawings, for example. So communications management is all part of that as well. It's keeping everyone up to date with what is current, what we're actually doing, as well as informing people.